So, and they might have this outlook of, well, things have been fine, in the past 30, 40 years. Why is it important that we go through this big change and start approaching these types of suits again?
Yeah, and if I could add in, so my understanding is you talked about the timeline, and then in 2010, the rules around mergers and acquisitions became even looser, right? And so at that point, basically it shifted to say, okay, you have to be a really gigantic company to warrant any scrutiny by the FTC. And then you came in during the Biden term and basically said, we're going to reset expectations in this major way. And so I think maybe for people who aren't following, there was a huge shift in how the government, the federal government through the FTC was viewing these mergers. So I'd also be curious as part of this question of like how you were thinking about like that shift in expectations, because literally all of us, like that's all we've known for our whole lives. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things. I think you're right that the last big government instituted breakup was of AT&T. But interestingly, corporations actually break themselves up not infrequently.
Is there an example?
Warner Brothers recently announced that it's going to be doing a spinoff. General Electric in the last few years has been kind of spinning off various components. And I say that just to make the point that actually breakups are not that uncommon in the corporate world, because one of the arguments you sometimes hear against antitrust instituted breakups is just how radical it is, how it's going to kind of lead to all of this, chilling of innovation.
If Mark Zuckerberg can't have Instagram, this is
our society.
It's a fail state. It's a fail state.
Yeah.
No, but my quick response to that would be, I imagine General Electric isn't spinning off portions of its company out of the goodness of its heart in order to keep a market more competitive. So did they have an argument there as to the reasoning behind it being different?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's actually investors and shareholders that are pushing for the breakups because they believe that some of these conglomerates actually have become inefficient. And if you actually spin out certain units, they could be even more profitable. And so you actually have, for example, some commentators and analysts that think Amazon should spin out AWS, and that would actually lead to even a better company. And so I just make that, note that as a way to kind of rebut sometimes what we hear, which is that breakups are radical. And so, like unicorns, it's like, no, actually they're not uncommon. And sometimes it's proper for the government to say, we need a breakup here. On your point, I think that timeline is definitely right. There were definitely some changes on the margins between administration. But one thing that was candidly quite impressive about the Reagan people was that they really came in with a vision and they were able to make it durable. And so we had 8 years of Reagan, 4 years of Bush. And by the time President Clinton came around, what had started off as being pretty radical Reagan administration stuff had kind of become the new common wisdom. And then we saw more or less maintenance of that approach through the Clinton years, through the Bush years, even through the Obama years. Now, again, you had some different priorities. You had, the Democrats generally were a little bit more vigorous, but more or less this basic worldview that the Reagan people had introduced stayed in place until the Biden administration.